We are closing out 2023 in style, looking forward to 2024. This is the year in review with myself, Eamon Khan, for Seconds Out, and Happy Punch's newly positioned Donagh Corby. Donagh, let's start about your year, first of all. A lot of
Yes.
movement, a lot of change, but on the upward trajectory.
Yeah, you could say that. No, I certainly, yeah, it was an interesting year. Had an amazing 10 months, 11 months with the Mirror Fighting. Unbelievable numbers. I mean, and working with Ben at the start of the year, then Martin and Harry throughout the rest of it. And just Martin Dome and Harry Davies, like what a year we had at the Mirror. Unbelievable. I would say that relationship is not fully over either. You know, we've got really good working relationship there. And then obviously moved on to Happy Punch, and we're doing huge numbers here and traveling here, there, and everywhere all over the world already. And we're up for a big 2024 and hopefully even more great stuff happening with Happy Punch in the new year.
Huge year indeed heading forward. Huge year was 2023 too in the social media influencer boxing scene. What are some of your highlights just to set the table in terms of this year, which has seen some pretty big fights happen?
Yeah, so if we go chronologically, I guess the first big highlight was Jake versus Tommy, which people, like, we were talking about this off camera. People are like, that was this year. Yeah, it was in February. And in fact, it was announced in January for February. Do you remember? It was like less than a month. They announced it. So it was just announced. They did the face off in London. Then it happened in February. And then, all that happened. And then, of course, you move forward. We had a great summer, lots of crazy stuff happening within the Prime card in October and around Halloween time. How could you forget Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury?
Yeah, some big fights littered throughout the year. Starting off with Jake versus Tommy, a real big event, a real big fight there too. Do you feel it delivered in all that it promised?
Yeah, I thought more so maybe than the KSI versus Tommy fight, which we'll talk about later. I think the KSI versus Tommy was a bigger fight in terms of numbers, from what I understand. Like, it sold more pay-per-view, it was in a bigger arena, all of that stuff. But in terms of what actually delivered on the night in terms of a show, how could you fault Jake and Tommy? The build-up was years in the making. Two legitimate prospects at this stage. Tommy showing off his best. Jake, had a pretty decent performance. A lot of people would say it was a good performance relative to like how little he should know compared to Tommy, and a star-making performance for Tommy Fury as well. Jake got the knockdown. So much drama, split decision. Just everything about it was fantastic. Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. It was great to go to Riyadh, which is obviously the home of big time boxing these days. And yeah, just so much great memories around that fight. Going back years, going back before even this year. So like when they were going to fight in MSG and when they were going to fight in Florida and all this great stuff with the Furies and Jake, and the fact that John was able to go, which he wouldn't have been able to in America. And back then, John was a lot more palatable than he is now. And so I just think, yeah, what a great fight week, and people should remember, and massive pay-per-view numbers too. I think 850,000 is the confirmed number, or something along those lines. Over 800,000 anyway is what I've heard. So yeah, huge success of a show, and one of the highlights of this year for me, for sure.
Tommy's reaction to getting the win was something.
Considering it was a split decision where he'd been dropped against a YouTube guy who started boxing like 4 years prior, I think. Yeah, for 5 years. Like, Jake first laced up gloves at the start of 2018, and he went to a split decision with Tommy, and Tommy was crying afterwards. It's hilarious. Yeah, it was great.
A great win for him indeed. Do you feel that Jake has, and Tommy, before we get into our little subtopics, but do you feel that they've capitalized upon that spotlight early in the year?
Yeah, I mean, both of them, right? Jake and Nate Diaz was massive, and then obviously he had his thing with Andrew August, and he's moving into his next phase now with the US Olympic team, and I think a couple of other pro fights. I think he's gonna have another one in February. And then Tommy, I mean, he turned a very limited boxing skill set, and kind of being in the shadow of his brother Tyson, and even his cousin Huey, and like even like a Tom Aspinall. He's in the shadow of all these guys, and he's emerged as, I mean, if you count it just numbers wise, when he's headlined the biggest pay-per-view draw of 2023, he's headlined the two of the biggest shows. In theory, he's been the headliner for 2.1 million pay-per-views, according to the numbers that are out there. So yeah, what a year for Tommy Fury out of seemingly nothing, and with 2 crap fights as well. Like, obviously, we had a bit of fun with the Jake one, but like, fair play to Tommy Fury. He never has someone as limited turn it into so much.
We'll dissect the KSI Fury fight in a second, but what do you feel is on the horizon for Tommy Fury heading into 2024? Because this Roy Jones Jr. fight was mooted. John Fury has said on an interview with Seconds Out, my colleague Danny Flexen said that, look, that fight isn't happening. And a lot of people have kind of, turned their thumbs down to that fight. But what do you feel is on the offing for Tommy, who, look, is making loads of money in this influencer scene, doesn't really need to, unless he really wants to, go back to the traditional scene?
Yeah, look, I personally think the Jake rematch is what he needs to kind of be pushing for. He should be arguing, well, I want to beat him cleanly and I want to make sure there's no doubt. And especially after the KSI thing, he wants a big performance. And I guess the selling point would be, and I think the Jake rematch is an easier sell than the KSI one, just because it was a vastly more entertaining, show. And even the night before, like, obviously the Prime card was massive and there were some unbelievable fights on there and the names on there were like on another planet. Oh, hello. Hey, Mrs. Khan. We can cut that, right?
Yeah, don't worry. She's
okay. Well, you're not on camera, so I didn't need to do that. I could have kept talking.
You're good.
All right. But yeah, look, the Prime card, they had some unbelievable names. And I mean, on another level in terms of the names, the name value of the Prime card was so much bigger than Jake and Tommy. But the actual fights, like Badou Jack won the Cruiserweight title. Adam Salo was fighting Musa Kaysen. It was just such a great night in Saudi. And I think the selling point for Tommy should be, I want to prove myself now. After 2 kind of lackluster ones, let me show you guys how serious I am. Jake's a lot better now than he was. Let's do 10 rounds. Let's go back to Saudi, or let's go to, Manchester Arena again. Let's do it. And I think there's less interest in the KSI thing for right now. But then if he beats Jake again, then he can do the KSI thing again. And, there's a lot available for Tommy. And certainly he's big on pay-per-view, it would appear.
That Prime card that happened in the summer, it was a real pick and mix of fights, and every fight that you picked out had some intrigue to it to any varying degree. We'll only be looking at the top 2 fights, but there were some great fights on the undercard as well too. We'll have to gloss over for that for the moment. But Dillon Danis really kind of took the heel role and ran with it, and really kind of brought some real eyes to this side of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen a heel like Dillon Danis. It was so intense, so hardcore. Actually, I think maybe, like, I don't know how to word it properly, but the Ian Gary thing was similar in the UFC last week. Obviously, Ian never got to fight at the end of it. And I mean, a lot of people would argue Dillon didn't fight either. But, I think, unbelievable promotion on Dillon's side. He just showed up in every way. The amount of media they made him do when Logan did nothing on fight week, and Dillon, every single outlet over and over again. I mean, he just absolutely sold the bejesus out of it. Probably cost him a bit in legal fees and all the rest of it. But no, Dillon was the star of the build-up, and unfortunately he didn't deliver in the ring. It is what it is. He's not a boxer, he's a jiu-jitsu guy. Logan didn't deliver in the ring either. That's the ultimate problem with the Prime card, is like, whatever about Jake and Tommy, to go back to that, Jake and Tommy did deliver. Like, it was a good fight that people are like, oh, Jake got the knockdown and there was this, and there was all this drama. The Prime card, like the 2 main events, unfortunately, they didn't deliver, which is unfortunate. But yeah, Dillon and Logan, the build-up was great anyway.
Build-up was great indeed. What for Dillon Danis next and Logan Paul? Logan continues his career in WWE with great success. Dillon Danis has made no bones about wanting to have a career in MMA, look to move into the UFC. But for those 2, will we see them back in a boxing ring?
Yeah, but I think so. I think maybe not a boxing ring for Dillon. I would imagine MMA next. The PFL makes more sense than the UFC for me, but I guess they want him to fight Paddy Pimblett. That would be a big fight. The UFC don't seem like they do that kind of thing, though. They don't seem like they do like the Paddy Pimblett and Dillon, like the crossover type things. I mean, I guess they had CM Punk and they've had a couple of people come in before, but
who would you pick?
I would find it hard to imagine Paddy Pimblett losing that one. Just Dillon is like, obviously his jiu-jitsu is unbelievable. Paddy's jiu-jitsu is pretty good as well, and Dillon's just on another level. Or sorry, Paddy's on another level in terms of like Paddy's striking is not great, but it'd be better than Dylan's, and wrestling would be probably better than Dylan's. And Dylan's like been inactive, boxed one time, and otherwise hasn't fought since the middle of 2019. So I'd have to pick Paddy on that one. But yeah, maybe MMA next, and then for Logan, keep up the WWE. I would imagine he'll box again. I'd imagine he'll want at least one actual like crowning win. He didn't win for his whole career up to the Prime card, and then he kind of didn't really win the Prime card either. Like he won, but it was a DQ, and it was the whole controversy and everything leaving the ring. And in fact, Dylan appealed the result, and it was the only appeal that probably had any merit because Logan's guy got in the ring before the fight was over. All this stuff, just an ugly scene altogether. And Logan would have wanted to silence Dylan for all the stuff he'd been talking. So I think we probably see Logan box again at some point. He wants to fight Tristan Tate. I actually think Tristan Tate versus Logan Paul is a really good fight. Tristan's had some injuries, but I think he's got surgery, and he would be able to come back and do one little boxing match, I would imagine. And I think those two big heavy hitters, big guys, I think that's actually a more intriguing fight than Jake versus Andrew. I think Jake versus Andrew's like, Jake's just, well, Andrew's eyes are shot anyway, and Jake's also like boxing professionally. Since Andrew retired, Jake's had, I think, 7 pro boxing fights. So yeah, I think that probably makes more sense. But yeah, let's do Tristan and Logan. But Logan, keep up the WWE because he's amazing at that.
But now the KSO fans remain silent after his defeat to Tommy Fury on that Prime card, and KSI has since somewhat abandoned the scene for now, outside of a spar with I Show Speed. But in terms of that fight, look, it was for a lot of people nip and tuck with Tommy Fury getting the nod there. Do you feel that KSI should rethink his current stance right now and return to the ring with his former rival and one of the co-originators of the scene, Joe Weller, taking on Bazinga next year? Then the potential, if Joe Weller comes through with the win, of having that rematch and igniting that fire again, which has never been quelled.
Bro, I don't know about a rematch with Joe Weller. That's a wild one. But I guess if Joe looked really good against Bazinga and he gets the storyline of like beating the one sideman guy, that's actually a bit of an idea. And I know they had a little back and forth at the Misfits 1 event, and him and Mams, Joe Weller and Mams had a whole thing. But yeah, no, I think I also would go back, and you said KSI's like ditched the scene. I mean, he's just not fighting. He's still promoting. He put on another event at Your Call. He's putting on this HS Tiki Taki event in January, like he's running Misfits, and the scene, like whether he's fighting or not, KSI is the scene. Jake, if anything, has ditched the scene. Jake doesn't care about influencer boxing. You couldn't ask Jake about B-Dave. You wouldn't know who he is. Like, I think KSI actually is the scene. But I think, for him, in terms of fighting, I reckon KSI, I've said this to you before, KSI is a winner. And all he does in his life is win. #1 album, biggest YouTuber, billions of dollars, big movies, Amazon Prime documentaries. This guy doesn't take L's. When you think of like the L's KSI has taken, it's like, oh, he looked stupid in a charity match where he raised millions of dollars. Oh, he lost to Tommy Fury in a fight everyone thought he won. Like, he doesn't really like lose. And it seems that this Tommy Fury thing is really bugging him. So I would imagine, we see KSI another time, because he will not end his career on, whether he believes it was legitimate or not, a loss.
Rolling through the final highlight of the year, and it was a real highlight that came out of absolutely nowhere, given the rhetoric heading into the fight, unless you were really a hardened MMA fan or in the Ngannou camp. And the Ngannou camp really championed their fighter to the hilt, including Mike Tyson as his addition to that camp there. But this was something that really no one was expecting, and Ngannou really catapults himself to somewhere near the top of the boxing sphere if he chooses to have a fight again in the boxing ring, and leaves Fury in somewhat of a situation heading into the undisputed fight next year.
Bro, what a night in Saudi Arabia. It was the most jealous I've ever been of my media colleagues covering something. I've never wanted to be somewhere more. Tyson Fury, obviously the build-up. He was actually one of the only people saying, hold on, this will be competitive. Fights the UFC heavyweight champion. And by the way, when I was in the Mirror, I would get in trouble for writing that Francis Ngannou was the UFC heavyweight champion and not the former UFC heavyweight champion. But as far as I'm concerned, John Jones is not the heavyweight champion. Tom Aspinall is not the heavyweight champion. Francis Ngannou is the UFC heavyweight champion. He beat Ciryl Gane, who was the number one contender. He then proceeded to leave the promotion. John Jones then beat the Ciryl Gane, who Francis had already got through, and then got injured and was going to fight Stipe Miocic anyway. And then Tom Aspinall, fair play. I think Tom Aspinall probably has a better claim to the title than John Jones does, but he beats the actual next contender, Sergey Pavlovich. So I think Francis Ngannou is the lineal MMA heavyweight champion, the lineal UFC heavyweight champion. And then he fights the boxing heavyweight, and everyone was saying no chance and it's going to be embarrassing. I remember talking to Thomas Carty about it the week of the Katie Taylor fight, and he was saying, yeah, it'll be more embarrassing than Conor McGregor and Floyd. And that was not embarrassing. Conor had what we thought was a moral victory back then, and Francis just on another level. A lot of people felt Francis won the fight. Another one like the Tommy Fury one where I think personally Tyson did enough to win all the rounds, but the knockdown, everything about it. When you look at the highlights for the year, like the real movie moments, it was quite literally Rocky. It was literally that. He doesn't win the fight at the end. People forget that Rocky doesn't beat Apollo Creed at the end, but he wins the night. He wins the event. And yeah, there will never be anything like what we saw that night again.
Can you reenact for me what your reaction was like when Fury crashed to the canvas?
I can't, but I think I maybe went, Dad, watch this, or something. I don't know. I think it was nothing too crazy. I didn't jump up and down or anything, and I don't want to reenact that anyway for you. I don't want to give you the views of me raging like Boogie2988, my future opponent. And I think, it was like, how did you react when you saw it? What were you thinking?
It was an oh my God. I remember I react quite visibly, and I remember when Povetkin knocked out Dylan White, and I think it's on Twitter. You can see my reaction. Rob Tebbett always brings it up about how vocal I am. I remember when Wilder knocked down Fury in the first fight when it was a tightrope walk in the 12th round, and I shot up off my seat. But I remember going, "Oh my God, what the hell is this?" In that moment, and sort of willing Fury to get up off the canvas, really.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you wanted? Of course, you're a boxing guy. You wanted Fury to get back and do it, right? You didn't want him.
I want to see the undisputed, and I think a loss would have jeopardized that.
Well, I mean, it would have completely destroyed it because it would have. I mean, a loss would have been the worst case scenario. Tyson remains WBC champion. Ngannou is now the lineal champion. You create out of nowhere. You created a third world heavyweight champion, and then Usyk has the other belts. It would have been a complete disaster. But it would have been unbelievable. For my friends at PFL, it would have been something else if they managed to get that decision. But no, what a night for MMA.
Fury's locked into the undisputed fight with Usyk, which we, fingers crossed, hopefully we finally get in February. What is the one fight outside of the rematch with Tyson Fury that you want to see Ngannou get?
I think I'd like him to do one MMA one first, just remind people his level. I think Renan Ferreira, the PFL champion this year, is tailor-made for Francis Ngannou. And what a fight. Renan Ferreira, the big 6 foot. I think he might be 6'9", an actual 6'9", like Tyson. Not like Tyson Fury, who's, rumored 6'9", but like this Renan Ferreira, the size of this guy, but he's the exact style that would suit Francis Ngannou coming back off of a boxing match. I think he should fight Renan Ferreira first, solidify himself as the best heavyweight in the world in MMA, because he hasn't fought in MMA since January of last year. So just remind people, oh, by the way, I'm not just one of the best heavyweights in boxing. I'm also the heavyweight champion in MMA, and I could beat the PFL champion. I love this Wilder thing, and it appears that Wilder's willing to do some sort of a mixing of the rules, which will make it really fascinating. Because when I tell you, Eamon, I was at the PFL in June in Atlanta, and they had Wilder do the punch machine, and they put a 4-ounce glove on him. It was one of the most terrifying visuals. Watching him punch something with a 4-ounce glove on, it was like, I can't imagine this connecting with human flesh. It was something else entirely. And I really want to see Ngannou versus Wilder with 4-ounce gloves on, no kicking. Maybe do the triad combat rules. Remember that? The triad from Triller? Do something like that with Ngannou versus Wilder. You're definitely not seeing the 10th round in that one.
Let's close this out with a couple of categories and picks from those categories. First of all, in the influencer social media boxing scene, Who do you feel had the best year? I would put forward Tommy Fury making the bank, getting the 2 wins over the 2 main men in the social media scene, and really kind of putting himself at the top of there, with rematches abound next year, future fights abound next year, real hot commodity going into 2024.
Yeah, that's an unbelievable pick. And I would say that if you hadn't already said it. But yeah, Tommy Fury, phenomenal year, 2 wins. I mean, a phenomenal year without ever doing anything phenomenal in the ring, but 2 great wins in terms of their numerical value. And I guess the correct answer, just by the numbers and everything, is Tommy, right? That's the correct answer. But I'm going to personally put forward my close friend and Happy Punches team captain, Anthony Pretty Boy Taylor. Started the year with a loss to Idris Virgo. After coming back, people don't know that during the build-up to the Idris Virgo fight, within a month of that fight happening, he had been on holiday. He took the fight on short notice. He had been on holiday, been kidnapped in, I think it was Colombia. I'm not sure exactly where he was. Kidnapped and pronounced dead. Left for dead, pronounced dead, and then came back, got back to training camp, started boxing again. He actually had to train at a different gym because AJ McKee, his friend, had a world title fight around the same time. So he had to train at Jackrabbit Boxing to get his training in, and still did okay against Idris Virgo. Not could have done better. But then the Salt Pappy fight, beats Salt Pappy, wins the Misfits light heavyweight title against King Kenny, all the while building up this Gabe Silva fight, building up a fight with Daily Perales, becoming a big star, 800,000 Instagram followers, throwing out the first pitch at the Oakland A's. I think if you talk about people who have built themselves from absolutely nothing, I'm super biased, of course. He's a Happy Punch guy. He's one of my best friends. But yeah, Anthony Taylor has turned, I mean, you talk about Tommy Fury turning like limited, like Anthony, very, very limited skill set wise when you look at the boxing, and has had some terrible results go against him. You know, any of his big fights, Tommy Fury lost, Chris Avila lost. It's Showstar. Everyone remembers Showstar. I mean, to go from that, Showstar and then Celebrity Boxing shortly after, were the 2 like disasters of his career. Those were only a year and a half ago. And now he's turned it around. And this year has been the year of the pretty boy. And now 2024, I mean, if he could beat Gabe Silva, God knows that, you know, the future is huge for Anthony Pretty Boy Taylor. So yeah, let's do Tommy Fury and Anthony Taylor. How about that?
Very, very solid pick indeed, even though you're saying you might be a slight bit biased with him, with your friendship with him, but I think that stands to be a very, very reasonable pick. And on the other side, people have had a real good year, but some haven't had the favor too much. The worst year in the influencer boxing scene, for me, there are a couple of picks you could choose, Ginty being one of them. Everyone seems to want to fight Ginty, but for me, unfortunately, I have to give this to Salt Pappy, who, coming off of a loss to Anthony Taylor, and then also Slim in real dramatic fashion, doesn't stand in the best of positions, having once been someone favored to get a form of stardom from this influencer scene.
Yeah, so before I give my pick, which I still have to think about, I'm going to defend Salt Pappy on this one and say you're forgetting that within this year, he had his star-making knockout over Josh Bruckner. So it can't be that bad of a year. He knocked out Josh Bruckner within January. So, and I remember that night, I talk about it every time I talk about Salt Pappy. I say I went to his coach Solomon, and we were in the arena, and the first thing, everyone's congratulating him. What a great win. What a great win. And I said, Saul, you've made a big mistake here. If I could swear, I said, you effed up here. And he was like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And I said, nobody in this influencer world is going to fight this guy. He's never going to get a fight again. And lo and behold, he knocked the guy out in January, couldn't get a fight till May. And the only fight they could get him was Anthony Pretty Boy Taylor, who is, despite what people think, actually one of the better fighters in that scene. And he's one of these guys who's like low reward, high risk, because if you beat him, he's kind of like a clown guy. But if you lose to him, that clown thing comes through as well. So that was a tough one, but that was a tight little fight in 3 rounds and all the rest of it. And then the Slim one, tougher to take. But again, Josh Bruckner, Anthony Taylor, and Slim, if you look at the influencer world, that's a tougher schedule than KSI had. It's tougher than Temper, Joe Fournier. Like, Tommy's the only one. Like, Tommy's better than all 3 of those. But Slim and, like, if you take away, let's say you take out Slim and Tommy, Anthony Taylor and Bruckner is harder than Fournier and Temper, I would say. And I would argue that maybe, that there's, I don't know. Like, I think that, yeah, I think Saul Papi had a tough schedule. So it's very harsh to say he had the worst year just because he lost a couple of fights. And he will certainly be back in 2024. Looks amazing. This is the other thing. Outside of the ring, turned his life around. He looks phenomenal. Looks like a model these days. Could be a movie star. Went back to the Philippines, had huge success there. So I think we're being a little bit harsh on old Saul Papi.
So who does stand as the one who takes the unfortunate crown there?
Oh, bro, it's a tough question. I hate to give an answer like that. I mean, I wouldn't do it to any of the Happy Bunch guys, even though Chase Demore had a tough year, but then he came back. Paul Bamba had a tough year. Yeah, you said Ginty earlier, and I guess he's kind of like a punching bag, but you gotta look at him. He had a win over Halal Ham, but it was an understated, like, people were very unhappy. Excuse me. People were very unhappy with the performance against Halal Ham, and then obviously got brutally knocked out by FaZe Temper. I don't think FaZe Temper had a great year either, even though he got his knockout win. But yeah, I guess I'll probably go for Ginty. But I don't like to labor on these things too much. And then, of course, he got kicked out of Misfits in London as well for some stuff outside of the ring.
The only way is up for Ginty and for a number of others, whether it be on Happy Punch or otherwise. Donagh, a real pleasure speaking to you throughout this year. Looking forward to a prosperous 2024 for yourself, myself, and the influencer scene as a whole. Hopefully, we finally get that Jake Paul versus KSI.
I'm not looking forward to a prosperous year for yourself.
You're not?
I'm looking forward to one for myself and for Happy Punch, but for you, I don't care if you have a prosperous year.
You want me to win 2024 worst year, do you?
Oh my gosh, I think actually, you know what? Scratch the Ginty thing. You and I, Dubs, had the worst 2023.